Welcome back. We are going to continue with differentiated instruction. I apologize for the abrupt ending on the previous video. So we had seen differentiating content, and we are now going to be looking at differentiating process. So process is, what are the students doing in order to learn? Content is, what are you providing them? Process is, what are they doing to learn? So the activities in which the student engages in order to make sense of or master the content. So there are a variety of ways you can do this. One thing you can do to differentiate the process is to have some students who might be working individually, some who might be working in a pair or a group. And that could be based upon their ability level. So students who are perhaps a bit more advanced could do something on their own, whereas other students might need to be paired up, especially if there's a more knowledgeable other in that pair or in that group. You could also vary the amount of time given, or simply allow students who need more time to have that extra time if they need it, because some students will go through things more quickly than others. You can also vary the amount of scaffolding that they're given. So for instance, think about notes. Perhaps to challenge some students to keep them from being bored, they might need to write all of their notes in the class. Other students for whom that would be too cumbersome or too much work could get fill-in notes similar to what we use for this class. Here's a short video to look at this idea of differentiating process.
Using the butterfly life cycle, we'll have the students reading the text for some students. For others who are not capable of reading the text, they will go through and identify features of the nonfiction text. For example, they will use captions, they will use boldface words to understand the life cycle of a butterfly. Then those students will use that knowledge of the butterfly cycle to either write what happens at each stage of the butterfly life cycle for those who are capable of that, or to take pictures of parts of the butterfly life cycle and put those in the right order, labeling the part of the life cycle.
So again, you can see they're still meeting the same learning objectives, but just doing it at a level that is appropriate for them. Here's another way you can do it. So let's say perhaps your students are working on fractions. You're always going to have students at varying levels of knowledge and skills when it comes to math, especially things like fractions. So you can see here with each of these sets of cards, you can see how they are different slightly based upon challenge. And so they're still building designs. It's just that in some of them, these are a bit more simple and these are a bit more difficult. Here's another way you can do it. So here we have some math workstations. And you can see that there are 3 different groups in the class, orange, green, and blue. And by those names, you would have no idea which group might be more advanced than others. And you can see that based upon the station that they're at, there are different things that they would do there. So for instance, orange is going to be doing a lot more problems than groups green or blue. And they're doing slightly different things as well. Here's another way of doing it. So this is for an English language arts class. And you can see again, orange, blue, and green. And you can see at each station, they do slightly different things. So finally, we can also differentiate based upon product. What are the students doing to demonstrate learning? Okay, the culminating project, where the student might rehearse, apply, extend what they have learned. Pardon the and there, I cut off the rest of it because it wasn't essential. So here's something to kind of put you in the mind of this. So does this seem fair? And you see here the teacher saying, for a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. With my question of, should all students be taught and assessed identically? That climbing that tree is obviously going to be way easier for some of these animals, like your monkey, but impossible for some animals like your fish or perhaps your seal or your penguin and your elephant. So what are some different outputs or products that students could provide to demonstrate that they've learned? So think whether it's final projects, things you do at the end of a term. If you're not sure if your answer is right, if you were thinking anything within the world of exit slips, exams, posters, presentations, some sort of group project or portfolio. All of those would fit. So output. The type of assessment can be varied. So you might have, let me go back real quick, you might have some students perhaps who have a multiple choice test. Multiple choice is actually considered to be one of the easier types of assessments because it is only based upon recognition. Other students might have short answer, which is more difficult because you have to recall the information. And other students could have essay perhaps. That's just one example for types of assessment. You could also say, well, some of you need to write a book report and some of you need to do a presentation, or perhaps even give them the choice based upon their ability or interest level. That obviously relates to mode of expression. Is it written? Is it verbal? Is it visual? There are all sorts of ways that students can demonstrate that they have learned something. And here, another one. So you can see here with the life cycle of the butterfly, here they just simply have to cut and paste. So they have to basically recognize the right step, and whereas here they're being a bit more creative. You can also, in terms of output, the length and difficulty can also be varied. So what might this look like? This is just one visual representation that I thought was helpful. So here you can say, see, the students are supposed to discover and discuss various characteristics of sea creatures, brainstorming and group according to common features. But here's one way you can differentiate that. So some students might just be coloring and labeling a sea creature book. While all the way down here, others might be researching a sea creature of their choice and writing a short report using illustrations. They're all meeting the same objective, but just doing it at a level that's appropriate. And here you can see so many possibilities of different kinds of products. It does not always have to be a report. It does not always have to be a test. But it does have to fit your learning objectives and your students. Something else you want to think about when you're using differentiated instruction is flexible groupings. It's a very important part of differentiated instruction. Let's start with the video to help with this. But first, what are some characteristics of flexible groupings? What do I mean? This will also help us with the upcoming video. So what are the characteristics of flexible groups? They're deliberate groupings, which means groupings done on purpose by the teacher. Not just saying everybody get in a group, but groups that are done for a reason based upon either the student's interests, their readiness of the topic, of the subject of the lesson, the way that they learn, or even it could just be some sort of a deliberate mix that you want to have a nice variety within the groups. But again, it is something that is deliberate by the teacher, not just a voluntary grouping with their best buddies.
Our yellow group is still learning how to do a lot of our literacy things. The green group is doing pretty well, but has a few things to work on still. And our blue group is hitting all the first grade standards and needs to be stretched. So our differentiation kind of takes two forms. The first is by student grouping, and the second is by modality of learning. We have 20 minutes per station, and there are 3 of the stations. The students will rotate through all 3 stations each day.
So our first station for the blue group is the computer station.
The students use a Google form to check in. They'll normally watch a video or carefully observe a photograph and answer some questions about that.
We watched a video about how to grow a seed. We had to type in our favorite part and why.
After they finish that form, they can check out an ebook.
And then you could do this game of reading called Teacher Master How to Read.
We're delivering things in a way that is visual, that is auditory, that is individual to the students through the technology.
After that, she rings the bell.
Clean up, switch up, first grade readers.
We switch to the sort station.
Our sort station is more of a physical modality. They're using their bodies, which is so important for first graders. They need to move. Kids are cutting out the words. They're gluing them down.
We had a contrasting game. It's fun because it's all mixed up and you had to find the right pieces. And then after we do that, we do rainbow writing.
That's another way that we differentiate. If students are able to get through more work, then they have some freedom of choice. Clean it up, switch it up. The last station, we're talking to each other and learning from each other. So that's more of the social interaction type of modality.
I like the teacher station the most because we get to be with Miss Gallagher and we get to learn cool stuff.
So take a look at the
And I just think that's great. It really shows in many ways how groupings helps her differentiate. Rather than trying to have the whole class sitting in front of her and differentiating, they do it through their groups. So this flexible grouping, so even though it is something that is designated by the teacher, you do want it to be flexible to where students aren't in the same group from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. They can move in and out of different groups, and you might even change it up regularly. Your groups might be homogeneous in terms of ability, so you want similarly abled students together. You might even want it to be heterogeneous on some days so the students can help and work with one another. You could also focus on things with independent learners or even the whole class. So again, this flexible grouping situation does need to be fluid. If I start off in September in the yellow group, I may not be in the yellow group the next month. Okay, it should be something that changes over time, varies. This is a great video showing.
Most of us grew up
I'll let them
classic
explain.
American education. You know, you go through a unit, whether it was math, social studies, or English, and at the end of the unit you had a test. Then you moved on to the next unit because you had to get through all the chapters by the end of the school year. And some kids would do well, some wouldn't. Some kids got good grades and some didn't.
In the past, we would just move on to the next chapter in the book. And sorry if you didn't get that. Maybe at the end of the year review, we'll try and touch on that. We wanted to get away from that practice. We made sure that we had a time in the day where if students did not master the skill that was previously taught, we gave them time to master that.
So these formatives are a way of assessing everything that you have learned about prime and composite numbers. So we're going to go ahead and get up our math offices. Put your first, last name on this test.
Is this a test that you have to take really fast?
No.
What we do is we teach an objective, and that objective is calendared out for us. And at the end of teaching that objective, we would give a formative assessment, which is usually on Friday. The objectives usually last about a week. And based on the results of that formative assessment, we know if students have mastered that concept or if they have not mastered that. Then what teachers do is they get together as a grade level and they look at their formatives and they look at what students mastered that formative and which didn't, and they divide students into the reteach group and into the enrich group.
And so how many reteaches are you looking at?
I'm looking at 5.
You're looking
I
at
reteach,
5.
yep.
Crystal, do you have your number yet?
Yes, 9.
Matt, what were your numbers?
8.
One of the things that we found through our experience with Reteach and Enrich is that the teacher who had a very good turnout on that formative assessment, they did something right in that classroom. They did something right with their instruction on that objective.
Is it safe to say a composite number is a number that has more than 2 factors? Yes. Very good. All right. That's what we're going to write down.
So we felt that that teacher would be the most appropriate person to teach the Reteach group.
I think they just need a little more time on this is what it looks like.
Exactly.
Well, I'm open to doing reteach for prime and composite. What about what you've got planned, Matt? You had some
Well,
enrichments planned, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I put 3 enriched programs together, 3 activities. I took what you had, and then I took what you had, and I took a sample on Marilyn Burns, and I just kind of read all 3 of them, and I redid them on my board, on one of the poster boards, and I wrote it in like a child-friendly version
Of the
it.
divisibility rules?
Yeah, and I gave an example underneath each one.
All right, so are we all set? Everybody feel comfy?
Sounds good
I think
to
so.
me.
Thank you, Kenzie.
That following week, every day, Monday through Friday, from 12:30 to 1 o'clock, we have Reteach and Enrich going on school-wide. So the teachers that are teaching Reteach, they have that Reteach group, and they stay with that group of students for that entire week. The enrichment students, they're split up, and they would rotate between all of the other teachers in that grade level.
Today in reteach.
So what a great way of trying to reach all of your students. Also, by using flexible groupings, your students get to work with a variety of peers, not just the same peers over and over again. And you also want to make sure that you're not labeling your students in any way that makes them feel bad about themselves, which is why they suggest using colors or animals, something like that. So that is it for flexible groupings. On our last video, we're going to look at some general advice.